The irony could not be more striking. For centuries, Russia has counted on General Winter as its greatest ally, the unforgiving cold that humbled Napoleon, broke Hitler's armies, and guarded its vast frontiers better than any army ever could. Yet now, in 2025, it seems that General Winter has betrayed Russia. Across the nation, from Siberia to the Volga, heating systems are failing, power grids are faltering, and millions are feeling the chill not from Western sanctions, not from NATO, but from the crumbling weight of Russia's own neglected infrastructure. The country that once prided itself on endurance in the face of winter now finds itself ill-equipped to survive it. Let's be clear, this is not merely about frozen pipes or cold apartments. This is the material consequence of decades of misallocation. While billions flow into military spending and geopolitical adventurism, the domestic foundations of Russian life, housing, energy, grids, utilities have been allowed to rot. You cannot wage an endless war abroad and expect the home front to remain warm, both literally and figuratively. The average Russian household now faces outages that last for days, and in cities like Novosibirsk and Chita, residents are taking to the streets wrapped in blankets, demanding heat. It's not revolution, not yet, but it is resentment real, growing resentment born from cold nights and colder politics. Meanwhile, Ukraine, once the victim of wintertime energy blackmail, is rewriting the rules of this conflict. Through resilience, adaptation, and Western support, Ukraine has turned the tide not by matching Russia's bombs, but by outlasting them. Where Russia once wielded energy as a weapon, now it struggles to supply its own people. The symbolism here is powerful. The empire that sought to freeze Europe into submission now finds itself shivering. And that, my friends, is what happens when an economy built on extraction rather than production, on domination rather than development, begins to collapse under its own contradictions. This moment should remind us of a broader lesson about capitalism and state power. When the logic of accumulation drives policy, when profit, control, and military prestige come before human need, sooner or later the system cracks. Russia's heating crisis is not an isolated failure. It is a symptom of a deeper rot. The myth of endless strength has been shattered by something as simple and as devastating as a broken boiler in a freezing apartment block. General Winter has not switched sides. He has simply exposed the truth. Russia's greatest enemy was never the cold outside. It was the corruption and economic decay within. For centuries, Russia has mythologized its winters as a natural defense, an ally that brought invaders to their knees. From Napoleon's retreat in 1812 to Hitler's frozen armies outside Moscow, General Winter was woven into the nation's historical identity as a silent but undefeatable guardian. Yet today, that same force of nature has turned from protector to punisher. In the winter of 2025, reports from across Russia paint a grim picture. Heating systems collapsing, power grids flickering, and ordinary citizens enduring sub-zero temperatures in darkened apartments. The irony is profound. The same winter, once celebrated for preserving the nation, now exposes its fragility. This reversal is not the work of nature alone. It is a man-made betrayal. Russia's vast heating infrastructure, much of it built during the Soviet era, has suffered decades of neglect. In cities such as Novosibirsk, Chita, and Yekaterinburg, outdated pipes burst under the pressure of freezing temperatures. Power plants, underfunded and overstressed, falter without spare parts or maintenance. The very systems designed to harness winter's bite have been left to decay, casualties of corruption and mismanagement. As Moscow funnels billions into military expansion and geopolitical posturing, the domestic sphere, schools, hospitals, housing blocks, crumbles quietly in the background. The result is not only physical cold, but a symbolic one. A nation frozen in its own contradictions. For the Russian people, this crisis is more than discomfort, it's a revelation. The myth of national endurance, the pride of surviving the cold, has turned into disillusionment. Citizens are beginning to ask why their government, so eager to project strength abroad, cannot keep their homes warm. It is an uncomfortable question for a regime built on images of power and control. General Winter, once a unifying legend, now becomes a mirror reflecting the state's failures. From an economic standpoint, this is the predictable outcome of a system that prioritizes external might over bland internal well-being. The winter, impartial and relentless, exposes the consequences of neglecting public infrastructure in favor of military industrial ambition. The cold that once defended the Russian state now reveals its decay. The pipes don't burst because of the frost. They burst because the foundations holding them together have rotted away. General Winter has not changed sides. He simply reminds Russia that strength built on neglect cannot endure forever. The collapse of Russia's infrastructure is not a sudden disaster. It is the slow unraveling of decades of neglect, corruption, and short-sighted priorities. The current heating crisis unfolding across Russian cities is a symptom of a much deeper and systemic decay. Much of the country's energy and utility networks were built during the Soviet era, designed to last for several decades, but never meant to sustain a modern economy without consistent reinvestment. For years, pipelines have leaked, heating grids have corroded, and power stations have aged without proper modernization. The statistics are damning. Experts estimate that up to 60% of Russia's communal infrastructure is beyond its service life, and in some regions, the figure climbs as high as 80%. The result is a system that fails catastrophically under pressure, literally bursting at the seams when winter's cold tightens its grip. What makes this failure particularly revealing is that it stems not from a lack of resources, but from the misdirection of them. Russia remains one of the world's largest energy producers, exporting vast quantities of oil, gas, and coal to global markets. Yet within its own borders, millions struggle to access reliable heat and electricity. The paradox is staggering. A nation rich in energy cannot keep its citizens warm. This contradiction lays bare how wealth in a centralized and oligarchic economy circulates upward rather than outward. Investments go to showcase projects and military industries, while essential civic infrastructure is left to rot beneath the surface. When local officials do to receive funding, Corruption often siphons it away before repairs even begin, leaving ordinary workers to patch pipes and wiring with outdated equipment and dwindling budgets. The consequences ripple far beyond discomfort. Infrastructure is the skeleton of social stability when it fails. Trust in institutions collapses with it. In freezing cities like Omsk or Irkutsk, citizens wake up to find their heating cut off, their children bundled in layers inside apartments that feel like ice boxes. Public anger grows, but so too does fatigue. People realize that complaints often vanish into bureaucratic silence. The cracks in the heating pipes mirror the cracks in Russia's governance. The system's decay is not just physical, it is political, economic, and moral. A nation that once boasted of its resilience now finds itself weakened from within, undone not by foreign enemies, but by the slow corrosion of neglect. Russia's ongoing heating crisis is not an isolated technical failure. It is the direct consequence of a political and economic structure that places war above welfare. Over the past several years, the Kremlin has poured enormous resources into sustaining its military, operations in Ukraine, resources that could have revitalized crumbling power plants, repaired aging pipelines, and modernized public infrastructure. Defense spending has soared to record levels, consuming a growing share of the national budget. Meanwhile, local governments are left scrambling to maintain basic services with shrinking funds. The imbalance is striking. While advanced missiles and drones roll off assembly lines, citizens in provincial towns huddle in unheated apartments waiting for repairs that may never come. The choice between guns and heat, between military glory and public well-being has been made, and it is the people who pay the price. This prioritization of war over domestic needs is not new in Russian history, but its consequences today are uniquely severe. In the Soviet era, at least there was an ideological narrative of collective sacrifice, a sense that hardship served a broader social purpose. Now, however, the war in Ukraine is waged in the name of geopolitical ambition, not shared prosperity. The ordinary Russian sees no benefit, only higher prices, shortages, and collapsing infrastructure. Every ruble diverted to the military complex is a ruble denied to hospitals, schools, and utility systems already on the verge of failure. The result is a hollowed out society where the state's obsession with control and expansion leaves the population materially and morally exhausted. Economically, this misdirection of priorities deepens the internal crisis. Wartime spending may stimulate certain industries, but it does so in a distorted, unsustainable way. Civilian sectors wither, labor is redirected to defense manufacturing, and innovation stagnates outside military applications. The domestic economy becomes increasingly dependent on war, feeding a cycle that rewards conflict while punishing social investment. Politically, the state relies on propaganda to justify this imbalance, portraying sacrifice as patriotism, endurance as strength. But reality cuts through the slogans. Citizens can endure censorship and isolation, but not endless cold. When heating fails and pensions shrink, when parents must boil snow for water, no amount of rhetoric can disguise the truth. A government that wages war at the expense of its people's basic needs ultimately wages war against its own future. As the chill of winter settles over Russia, so too does a deepening resentment among its people, a quiet, simmering anger that no amount of propaganda can fully suppress. Across regions from the industrial cities of Siberia to the small towns along the Volga, citizens are confronting the reality of living without a reliable heat or electricity. What once might have been dismissed as isolated breakdowns has now become a nationwide pattern of neglect. Families wrap themselves in blankets as pipes burst, schools close for lack of warmth, and elderly residents rely on electric stoves to stave off the cold. In these moments of shared hardship, a collective frustration takes shape not only at the failing infrastructure, but at the political system that allowed it to decay. Public resentment in Russia rarely erupts. Suddenly, it accumulates. For years, citizens have endured economic stagnation, inflation, and eroding living standards, while being told that their sacrifices serve a greater national mission. Yet the visible contrast between state propaganda and lived experience is growing impossible to ignore. When televised speeches praise military victories and economic stability, but the daily life is defined by shortages, outages, and freezing apartments, this belief turns into quiet defiance. Local officials, once shielded by bureaucracy, now face the brunt of public anger. Videos circulate online of residents confronting mayors and governors, demanding answers for the lack of heating or the endless delays in repairs. In a society accustomed to caution, such open displays of frustration hint at a shifting mood beneath the surface. This resentment is not yet revolution, but it carries the seeds of transformation. People do not forget nights spent in the cold, children sleeping in coats, or promises broken year after year. The more the state insists that all is well, the more glaring the contradictions become. Disillusionment grows strongest not in moments of dramatic collapse, but in the slow erosion of trust. Every unheated apartment, every unfulfilled repair order, every dismissive official statement deepens the sense that the government no longer serves its citizens. It is in this erosion, quiet, persistent, and widespread, that the true danger lies. A population that has learned to endure may also learn to reject endurance as virtue. Resentment, once kindled by cold and hardship, becomes a political force waiting for its moment to ignite. Ukraine's ability to withstand Russia's relentless assaults on its energy and infrastructure systems has become one of the defining stories of modern resistance. What began as a desperate struggle for survival in the face of overwhelming force has evolved into a case study in strategic resilience, a demonstration that adaptability, innovation, and unity can offset even the might of a larger military adversary. During the earlier stages of the war, Russia sought to weaponize winter, targeting Ukraine's power plants, gas depots, and heating systems to plunge cities into darkness and demoralize the population. Yet, as the years passed, Ukraine transformed this vulnerability into strength. Through rapid repair systems, decentralized power generation, and international aid, it has managed to keep the lights on, even under the harshest bombardments. The heart of Ukraine's resilience lies not merely in technology or logistics, but in social solidarity. Communities have learned to organize locally, sharing resources and adapting to scarcity. Volunteer engineers and workers rebuild grid lines within hours of attacks, often risking their lives to restore power to hospitals and shelters. Municipalities have created networks of invincibility centers, places where citizens can charge devices, stay warm, and access food during outages. This collective defiance has turned infrastructure repair into a moral act of resistance. The message is clear. Even if Russia destroys, Ukraine will rebuild faster. That spirit of reconstruction, multiplied across thousands of cities and towns, has become an unbreakable weapon. International support has also played a crucial role in this transformation. Western nations have provided advanced air defense systems, energy equipment, and financial aid to stabilize Ukraine's grid. But Ukraine's success cannot be reduced to outside assistance. It reflects a fundamental shift in mentality. The country no longer views itself as a passive victim of aggression, but as an active participant in shaping its future. Each repaired substation, each restored power line is an assertion of sovereignty. In this context, Russia's attempt to freeze Ukraine into submission has backfired spectacularly. Instead of surrendering to cold and darkness, Ukrainians have harnessed adversity to strengthen national identity. Winter, once a weapon in Russia's arsenal, has become a test of endurance that Ukraine continues to pass, proving that resilience, when grounded in unity and purpose, can outlast even the most formidable force. The heating crisis gripping Russia serves as more than a domestic emergency. It is a vivid lesson in the contradictions that define its economic system. At the surface, Russia presents itself as a powerful, resource-rich nation boasting immense reserves of gas, oil, and coal. Yet beneath that image lies a structural weakness, an economy that prioritizes extraction, militarization, and political control over sustainable development and human welfare. The result is a paradox, as glaring as it is tragic. A country that fuels the world cannot adequately fuel itself. This is the classic contradiction of a system where state and oligarchic interests merge to pursue accumulation and power rather than social progress. It is an economy that grows outward in ambition but collapses inward in function. These contradictions are not accidental. They are the predictable outcome of a political order built on inequality and centralization. When wealth is concentrated at the top and governance serves the preservation of that concentration, the needs of ordinary people become secondary. The Russian government spends billions expanding its military industrial base, showcasing weapons and international influence, while domestic infrastructure rots beneath the surface. Workers in energy plants are underpaid and overworked, local governments underfunded, and corruption drains whatever investment remains. In such a structure, decay is not an accident of history. It is a feature of the system itself. The pipes that burst in Siberia are not just symbols of technical failure. They are manifestations of an economy that has lost touch with its purpose. From a Marxian perspective, this reflects the internal contradiction between production for human need and production for profit and control. The state's fixation on projecting power abroad undermines its legitimacy at home as material conditions worsen for millions. When people cannot heat their homes, the abstractions of nationalism and glory lose their meaning. These contradictions expose the unsustainable foundation of a system that consumes its own resources faster than it can renew them, both material and moral. The heating crisis, therefore, becomes more than a seasonal event. It is an economic parable. It demonstrates how, when a nation organizes its priorities around accumulation rather than welfare, even its natural advantages turn into liabilities. The collapse of infrastructure is not just the failure of technology, it is the failure of an economic logic that has forgotten whom it was meant to serve. And so, as Russia shivers under the weight of its own contradictions, a deeper truth emerges, one that no propaganda, no censorship, and no army can silence. The cold that now grips the nation is not just the chill of winter, but the frost of economic decay and moral exhaustion. When a government chooses power over people, conquest over compassion, it builds its own downfall, one frozen pipe and one silenced voice at a time. History is repeating itself, but with a cruel inversion. The great defender, General Winter, no longer shields Russia from its enemies, it exposes the failures it tried to hide. The lesson is clear and unavoidable. No empire, no ideology, and no leader can survive for long when its citizens are left in the cold, both in body and in spirit.